Steve, welcome.
Nice to see you, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. We're diving in. Tell me. Let's see. I live in Portland, Oregon. Actually, I live in a suburb of Portland. I was born and raised, believe it or not, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I only point that out because New Mexico and Oregon are quite different places. I did end up at school in Virginia, so that might be of interest to you.
Where in Virginia?
James Madison University in Harrisonburg. How about that?
Okay, yeah, you were at Duke. I had friends that went to James Madison.
Yeah. Well, when you get to be as old as I am, to be honest, every time I talk about that, it feels sometimes like I'm talking about someone else's life. Like that was a long time ago for me,
Uh-huh.
but it's still fun. It's nice to think about that. So yeah, I live here. I'm married. I've got four kids who are all up and gone. Three of them are married, one's getting married, and one of them has two grandkids. So
Hmm.
I'm actually a grandpa, and that's really meaningful in my life. And I know we're going to dive into the work that I do, but yeah, I guess that's a big part of my life as well as I've been an executive coach for the better part of 26 years. I probably have, I don't know, they count that for marketing every once in a while, right? I have something like 35,000 hours of one-on-one coaching with executives and leaders really all over the country, I guess Canada and other places in Europe. So I don't know, feels a little bit of a stretch to say worldwide, but I have worked with people in different countries. But yeah, and I have dedicated a huge element of my life to the study of really how the human brain changes itself. And so that in the neuroscience field is called neuroplasticity. And so I've got certifications from the Neuro Leadership Institute and also through UCLA at the Mindsight Institute and interpersonal neurobiology. And so I don't always get to bring all that brain science stuff to my coaching, but it informs me a great deal. And it's also very impactful on my own personal life. And so, when you were talking about getting into mindset, I've probably dedicated, 2 decades to understanding what is mindset, how do we impact mindset, and how mindset is so relevant to really everything.
Yeah, so when we were talking before pre-show, I was talking about mindset being a huge thing, right? And it seems like it's not anything that ever goes away. I mean, one of the things that I feel like always sticks with you is imposter syndrome. No matter what level you are, what you have achieved for whatever reason, I've always heard that is something that you just never get over for whatever reason.
Maybe. Again, when you and I speak about mindset or the brain, I'll give you and your listeners kind of a fun little fact. The brain has, well, actually, the human body, most of it's encapsulated behind our skull, but the brain has roughly 100 billion with a B, 100 billion nerve cells called neurons. Right now, some of them are in our gut biome and in our nerves throughout our body, but a lot of them are in our brain, 100 billion. And off each nerve cell, there are these things called synapses. Synapses are how the nerves actually communicate with one another. And per nerve cell, there's roughly 10,000, depending on where it is in the brain, but call an average of 10,000 synapses per cell. So if you multiply 100 billion times 10,000, you get 10 to the 15th power.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one followed by 15 zeros. But that's not the mind blowing part. The mind blowing part is that doesn't even come close to calculating the permutations that are possible within that, which some neuroscientists and other people have calculated to be incalculable, almost infinite. So when you say imposter syndrome, you've always heard that all people have, well, there's now 8 billion plus people on the planet. And I don't know, whenever we talk about neuroscience, it's hard to use superlatives like everyone and always and
Right.
that because the human brain is so different. Yeah, we can make some general assumptions. And I do believe imposter syndrome is pervasive, that it happens with everybody forever. I've never seen that research, so I don't know about that.
Yeah, it wasn't scientific fact. I just going based off of one individual or two people that have accomplished a ton, and they constantly talk about imposter syndrome. People that I have worked with in the real estate industry who, I look up to have also mentioned it. I, of course, suffer from it as well. So that's why going based off of my own experience.
Yeah, and so and we all do that, right? If I
Hmm.
recognize something in my world that I see through the lenses of my view, we
Hmm.
can all have a tendency to go, the whole world sees this because that's how I'm viewing it.
Right.
And by the way, there's a really wonderful book, if you want, on human biases like
Hmm.
imposter syndrome and different biases that Dr. Daniel Kahneman wrote called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I tell people there's a lot of people that write a lot of books. Dr. Kahneman won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work on social economics. And so there's some people that, you know, that's not everybody that writes a book wins a Nobel Peace Prize for their work, but
Right.
biases like confirmation bias and imposter syndrome and those different kinds of biases. Yeah, it does seem like he did say something like, if you have a brain, you have a bias.
Hmm. Right. Like no matter how objective I try to be, there's always some kind of it's not possible, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's, technically I didn't come on your show to talk about coaching, but because it's not possible, that's why people hire coaches, because in with the wisdom that you have, just so you know, you can pretty much only see 90 degrees around you. So
Mhm.
if you want to grow, the reason someone would listen to their show is because I want to invest in real estate and whatever. And I think this and I think that. But maybe there's people like John Chan who think differently than I do, and I can learn from their perspective.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about all this science and brain, like synapses and nerves. What did you go to school for?
Business.
Then where did you learn about the brain?
Yeah. Well, that, again, as you get into some of the story, again, I started to become a coach. I won't give you all the background of that, but needless to say, like even when I was at James Madison University, I was an athlete. I was a high school All-American, top in the country in my field. Um, Interestingly, I had to work really hard to get that good. And I only say that because some athletes are naturally gifted, right? You see Tiger Woods and some of these people or whatever in golf, or Michael Jordan, like I'm making that up, but when they were really young, you saw the gift. Like some people are naturally gifted at that. I didn't have that. I only got the gift of the desire to get better. But because of that desire, it led me into coaching because I had the ability to see what the struggle was all about, and because I worked really hard at it. And I might even suggest that people who are naturally gifted athletes might not be great coaches. Doesn't mean they're not good people, but because coaching requires the ability to see and help other people see the struggle. And if you didn't see it, I'm not saying they didn't have any struggles, but you see what I'm saying? So
Right.
when I got out and I got into coaching, I spent the first, I don't know, decade of my life in coaching, primarily telling people what to do and holding them accountable. And there really wasn't a lot of science behind what it is that we were doing. We were helping people and it was great. And that organization's great. But I started, John, to become interested in, because what I was seeing is it didn't feel to me like the changes people were making were lasting. Like if I tell you, hey, you need to go and exercise, and let's say you agree and you start doing that. Well, how many times in your life do you start doing something and then stop doing it? How often in your life have you gone, that's it, I'm going to do this thing, and you start and you don't do it and start, that's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm the kind of person that after years of trying to help people through that, I started to grow in my interest of what is it about people that have a desire to go and do something, and their passions there, their purposes there, they're really clear, and they start and stop and they start and stop. And so for me, it became something of an itch. It really started to, like, because I was in the work of helping people change, and I itched like, what, wait. And I'm the kind of person that, like you sound like you're a growth oriented guy. I started to research what actually created human transformation. Well, that research, maybe it started with a Google search. I don't know, way back then. That was probably in the early, 2010s. But, you know, what that led to was I started reading books in emotional intelligence. I started to take classes in the field of emotional intelligence. I started there then to get into neurochemistry and neurobiology. I'm married to a doctor, and so that's part of our talk. Like, she can help me with some of the cellular structures and biology of stuff. And I just became fascinated by the human brain, so much so that I ended up at the Neuro Leadership Institute and got certifications through them. And then Dr. Daniel Siegel, who wrote Mindsight, he was the head of neurobiology at UCLA, or at least psychology, and he wrote a book called Mindsight. And I went to the Mindsight Institute and actually got certified through his course in interpersonal neurobiology, all in a pursuit to understand how the human brain worked. Now, it's so vast that, that could, some people take that and go get into neurology and become neurosurgeons, right? I'm going to work on someone's brain. Other people become therapists and psychiatrists, and other people become practitioners of other things. I understood and did some of these certifications so that it could help me understand the practice of coaching people. So no, I'm not an MD. I'm not a PhD. And I don't know, maybe it was just late in the game to go do that. I have taken enough coursework. Dr. Siegel told me that one time. I've taken enough coursework to probably have degrees. But for me, I suppose that sometimes when I hear people with all their degrees and they finally go to college, there becomes a gap between their ability to communicate the information, because I'm sorry to say, but a lot of academicians get trapped in academia, right? A few people know how to, like Dr. Siegel knows how to communicate to the world. I just always felt like there was a great opportunity to take the information from academia and be able to apply that to guys like you and I who are trying to grow a real estate practice. I mean, I don't care about neurochemistry, and I just want to know how my brain works better so I can make better choices and do some stuff and stick to what I'm doing. And so that's what I endeavored to do. And that's what my organization Rewire does, right? There's 16 coaches that we have now around the country, and we all focus on mindset. We're not the coaches that go do this and do that. We're actually coaches that go, let me help you think about that differently. Because at the end of the day, if you don't think differently, you're probably not going to act differently, at least over time. It doesn't mean you can't act differently by Friday, but you won't typically act differently over time until you explore how you think, how you feel, and what you're referring to as mindset. And that's what we do.
Okay, that's a really helpful explanation because, I mean, for me, I went to school for accounting, but then when I went out to the job, to the industry, I didn't feel like I didn't put a ton of effort into school, and so I didn't learn a ton. And so when I went out to the real world, it was very difficult for me to keep up with what I was trying to do. But then when I spent all this time learning about real estate and how to do this, I've learned so much more at a much faster pace than I did in any of the subjects that I took in school. And so I completely understand where you're coming from there because I had an interest in it, and without the interest, it's hard to really dig into it. Um, and I'm really glad that we're talking about mindset because I mean there's different levels, right? We all face mindset issues. When we're first getting started, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is I don't have any value to bring to someone else. Like, why would anybody want to talk to me? So how would someone get over something like that?
Well, get over. So maybe frame your question in a way.
I guess how do you address mindset issues where you feel like you don't have value to bring to uh I guess a new industry?
Uh, well, I would point out that the manner in which you're asking that question is interesting for me,
Okay.
because think of, and again, whether you chose to use these words or not,
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you bring, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is why I studied and spent so much time in the field of emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
because as I share with people when I speak publicly, like, by the way, you will take more actions or not. Sometimes it's inaction, not based on the logic, John, but rather on how it makes you feel. So when someone doesn't feel like they add value, I would first point out, like, well, let's understand what part of the brain we're speaking about.
Okay.
And therefore, and again, I don't mean to go into too much neurobiology with you. We'll just use two parts of the brain. You can handle two of them, right?
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex, right? The part of your brain that uses logic and language and reason and higher level thinking, right? We have this part of our brain that we use logic, was very distinct from the limbic system, which includes our thalamus and hippocampus. And forget all of that. Just know that the limbic system is generally where we emote, where we have emotions. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm hungry, I'm happy, I'm elated, I'm euphoric, whatever it is. And those are different parts of the brain. So when someone says, I don't feel like I add value to the world, well, sometimes people would work with those people. If you're asking me, I could go in and use logic and go, yes, you do. And here's why and how. And I could use logic to show you that you do that. But the problem with doing that is it wasn't ever a logical conversation, because you didn't ask me, hey, prove to me logically that you add value. And so I would actually ask you some questions about, wow, let's talk about that perspective of how you feel like that and why you feel like that, and get you, believe it or not, to explore emotionally the landscape that you're doing, because it is, you're not going out to the world, not because of the logic, right? So guys like you could bring someone on your show going, make these many calls, do it like this, do the math like this, if you do this and this and this and this and this, you can own real estate, you can have a thing, you can build to 10 million. Logic. But you've noticed yourself, some people don't do that, not because the logic doesn't make sense, because you're dealing with emotional intelligence. I don't feel like I add value. I don't feel like I could get there. Feel. Now, to some listening to this, they might think, oh man, what a touchy-feely concept. Well, I'm just trying to tell you how your brain works. That touchy-feely concept rules how you live your life. That's why we address it. That's why you telling me ahead of time, like, wow, getting into mindset, I think it's important. Well, yeah, because mindset includes both the prefrontal cortex and how you feel, and how we integrate the actions that we take, right? I looked up a quote right when you said your thing, just so you know. I looked up this quote by Saint Exupery. I'll read it word for word here, but Antoine Saint-Exupéry had this quote where he said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood and divide the work and give orders. Don't do that. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So I dare say that wherever you went to George Mason University, if I read that correctly, and you got a degree in accounting, I don't think you yearned for college.
No, it's
You
true.
weren't waking up and going, oh, I can't wait to go to my cost accounting class or whatever. Like, probably not. But when you learned about real estate, something in you was like, the way I read a little bit of your story and your dad and this and that, and there was something that was ignited in you, a passion, i.e., how it made you feel, and therefore you were on a pursuit. No one needed to hold you accountable because you yearned for this vast and endless sea. Well, that's very emotional. Now, you still had to do stuff. We got to do this and do that. So both are important, but I think oftentimes we undervalue and underplay emotional intelligence and how the mind is, what you'd call mindset, because we're giving people facts. So even in your business, I might suggest, again, I haven't studied it all, maybe you do that, but if you really want to help people, it's both. Here are the facts. Here's how you do this, blah, blah, blah. By the way, here's how you might feel. Maybe you have imposter syndrome, maybe whatever. Those things are huge, because all the facts in the world might not get you buying or doing real estate. Instead, what it might be is how do you approach it in your mind, i.e., mindset?
That was a really good, amazing response because I didn't even realize that I used the word feel. To me, whenever I've talked to friends, family, whoever it has been about what their path should be, what they should do, the actions they should take, it was all fact-based because that's just how, it logically goes into my head. I see myself as really logical, but I never realized how emotional I was because I've always kind of suppressed that portion of my brain, or at least tried to.
Well, that's the funny part. If you try to suppress it, here, so I'm sorry, my work causes me to have all these crazy sayings because there's some really smart people that said really smart things.
Yeah.
I'd love one day to make up my own sayings. I don't have any yet. I can just regurgitate other really smart people. But
Uh-huh.
they're saying in neuroscience, and this was largely from Carl Jung. Carl Jung was the Swiss psychiatrist that was a contemporary and actually student of Sigmund Freud's. And he said, what we resist persists. So if you suppress emotions, go, don't feel that, don't feel that, don't feel that, it'll cling to you. Whether whether you don't think you have these things or not, they're still running under the, you're no, even though you might see yourself as a logical guy, you still have a limbic system.
Right.
You're every bit as emotional as I am, every bit. Now, how you express that emotion is different. I might be crying and laughing, and you can hear in me, I'm sort of this exuberant guy, and you're more subdued. But we both have a limbic system. And by the way, that limbic system, computationally, there's a fact. I'm going to use a fact about emotions. How about that? Your limbic system, where you feel computationally, is infinitely more powerful than the prefrontal cortex. I mean, not infinitely, that's a lot. Way more powerful. In other words, facts are good. How you feel is ruling you, whether you see it or not. And that's why lately people are talking about mindset, because there is a push to go, gosh, if we don't get our mindset right, all the facts in the world, what are they doing?
Yeah. So then, so now I feel like there's a whole nother level of mindset that I
Yeah.
need to
Well,
address.
welcome to my world. It just opens up it's just a new can of worms when you get into the brain, like, and it just, then you're spending like I am 10 years trying to, and by the way, it just keeps opening and opening and opening. And, it's crazy. But anyway, go ahead. Forgive me. I cut you off.
No, no, you're fine because one of the things that I have struggled with is raising capital, right? So raising capital for opportunities that logically and reasonably, I've had trouble, getting behind certain deals just because there are things about it that I just didn't think that I thought we could beat with other types of assets. One of the things is multifamily versus RV parks. My I always chase cash flow, right? And RV parks had much higher cash flow and have an equity multiple versus, multifamily where it's mostly it's some cash flow, but mostly an equity multiple just because of value adds. And so, finding the right asset to really get behind and I guess subconsciously, emotionally get behind and say, I can get behind this or I can sell this has been what I was looking for. But then when it came to actually selling it to, or not selling it, but raising capital for these opportunities, I struggled because it was all fact-based and I wasn't pulling on anybody's emotional strings. So then how I guess how do you make that transition? How is it that you, outside of just practice, what can you do or what can an individual do who's more logic based, pull on or figure out how to tap into someone's emotions?
Well, that's close to the $20 million question as I've ever gotten. Like, if I knew exactly how to do that, like, believe me, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be on my own island, or wherever.
Mm,
But there are some things. First of all, being aware of it. Being aware of it. Just having this conversation might create in you, like, maybe you began to be aware that it isn't just about listing out the facts. It's about, if you're going to persuade somebody to do something, I would tell you a fact only approach will only get you so far. Now, you can find some fact based people, well, maybe yes or maybe no. But for most human beings, there's a combination of the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, right?
Mhm.
So, how can you do that? Well, you can practice it yourself by recognizing that it's an emotional thing for you as well, and share with people what emotions you went through. That's one thing to do, because you can share the experience of doing that yourself. But I'm a little concerned, and again, you didn't mean to do this, but I don't know that we should use this knowledge of mindset ever to coerce someone just because we
Right.
pulled heartstrings.
Right.
By the way, there are plenty of people who do that. They show up at events where some rah-rah speaker is going, we can do this and we can do that. And it's all heartstrings. And next thing you know, people are making limbic only decisions they don't have no facts.
Right.
Right. So isn't that interesting? Like, I guess what I would support is both. And technically, it isn't, hey, I'm just going to help you pull emotional strings. Maybe we could talk about, how do we help people integrate the prefrontal cortex with the limbic system? What I am feeling. Okay, you agree with the math. I've showed you that you're not pulling the trigger. Let me ask you a question. What are you really worried about? That's just a simple question.
Right.
So let me ask you, now that you're a neuroscientist with me, asking someone what they're worried about and just genuinely wanting to listen, is that a prefrontal cortex question, or is that a limbic question? Is that emotional, or is that a fact? What are you worried about?
I think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah, because they have to respond, they have to process what they're worried about.
Yeah.
But if you said, didn't you hear me? 1 + 1 = 2. I showed you the cash flow, whatever. That is a prefrontal cortex only based conversation.
Right.
So I'm a little reticent to just go, here's how we do only limbic and pull strings, because I'm
Mm.
not the person that stands up and I know how to do it. I can get you fired up. But I don't like to use the work manipulatively.
Right.
But I do, if you see that an investment for someone is good for them and you believe in that and it's healthy and whatever, and they might not be taking advantage of something good because they're only logic based, well, then, yeah, you might ask some limbic like questions that help them integrate their own mind so that they're not making decisions that are only fact based or only limbic based. And if you did that really well, I think it could be super powerful for you and your business.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, no one's here to manipulate anybody else, but knowing that, understanding this is a really good opportunity, and then presenting the facts has not been enough, obviously. And so, how do we tailor the facts and just make it, or not tailor the facts, but the facts are the facts, but I guess highlight the points that would really get someone excited, I think is the route that I really want to be able, is what I want to be good at.
Yeah. Well, take that quote by Saint Exupery:
Mhm.
don't drum up men and make them do this and make them do that. Right.
Right.
If you looked that quote up by Antoine Saint Exupery and you saw it, you'll see this fact, hardcore, do this thing. And then he starts talking about yearning for the vast and endless sea. Now, obviously, in that, he's accentuating the fact that if you really want to build a boat really well, don't show all the facts, make people do stuff.
Right.
If you get a group of people going, I can't wait to be at sea, a boat will get built. So
Right.
maybe your question ought to be, I wonder what I can do to help people see and feel something where they yearn to be a part of it. Ah,
Yeah, I actually like that a lot better.
yeah. Well, it moved you.
Yeah.
You were telling me that apparently accounting in school didn't move you. You got through it, okay, but according to you,
Yeah.
Yeah, you got through it, but I noticed that your livelihood is not in accounting per se.
Yeah, and everything I did was logic based. Accounting stable, makes good money. Got a CPA because I heard you get paid more, right? But I didn't have a passion for any of it.
Yeah. Well, again, logic based. Again, think of what you're saying. In my
Yeah.
language, you would have said, I leaned heavily on the prefrontal cortex, but maybe didn't explore so much what was going on limbically. Now, what's cool is if you did both, power. It's super powerful and it's very complete. And you can still speak to people who, and again, I'll give you a little. I'm doing a lot of neuroscience here, but the brain is split in two. We knew that
Mhm.
millennia ago. You can crack someone's skull open and see there's two hemispheres.
Right.
In the 70s, they used to talk about right brain and left brain. Have you heard that language?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, so that's largely been debunked. So like people aren't a right brain or a left brain because the brain's very integrated. Now, you can have a pathology, Asperger's or something, where the right part of the brain has a pathology. But for most normal people who don't have that pathology, it's very integrated. However, it seems like people might have a dominance, right? So, what
Hmm.
you're saying to me is in your life, John, you are left mode dominant. I lean heavily on logic. If I came on and went boom, 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 you'd like, yeah, brother, bring it. 1 + 1, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You are left mode dominant. You're smiling, you're laughing, you're interested, you're this. You have a right mode. You have a you're not dysfunctional and you don't have a pathology, but you might be left mode dominant. You might meet people at a party who are right mode dominant. They're fun loving and outgoing and hey, how's it going? And you can feel their emotions. Next thing you know, they're crying in the corner or they're, whatever it is. Like people go, oh, super emotional. Well, they might be right mode dominant. So really sometimes what I'm helping people do, because by the way, I'm probably a little more right mode like you and I, even if we went bowling or something, we might look puzzling at each other like, how does he do that? Like, that's unbelievable that you have that much logic. And you might look at me and like, wow, that's crazy that, like, put, quit crying about stuff, just add 1 +, whatever it is. But so that just shows a dominance. So here's the real, I'm giving you part of your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can we learn if you're left mode dominant? How can you learn to integrate some of the right mode in so that you can be a more effective communicator to a broader group of people?
Hmm.
And if you're right mode dominant, how can I learn to slow down and use sequential thinking so that I can be a more effective communicator to left mode dominant people? And that is a really interesting pursuit. And there are certain things that we can do. Part of it is just being aware of it.
Yeah. So is that something that you're born with, or is it just based on your upbringing, your how you were how you grew up, I guess?
See, you told me this show was very extemporaneous and we're just having a dialogue.
Yeah.
You've asked me 3 questions so far. Like anybody that's listening to this is going like, so basically what you just asked me is a nature nurture question.
Yeah.
Are we more nature nurture? Well, like humility dictates that I tell you that debate has been going on for a lot of years by people that are way smarter than you and I. I can give you my opinion,
Hmm.
but if you really wanted to research that, then call Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's just a freaking brilliant neuroscientist, or Dr. Siegel or someone like that, and ask them what they think about nature versus nurture. Like other things, if you don't get them on your show, you get me. I can offer an opinion.
Hmm.
Number one, it's both. Clearly, it's both. You have genetic code in you that dictates your color of your skin, how tall you are, whether your hair will fall out or not. There's genetic code, including in our brain. So we might be predisposed to certain things genetically, but it's been demonstrated quite clearly that there is learned behavior. So if your question is right mode dominance and left mode dominance learned or inherited? My answer is I'm not sure.
Okay.
How's
And the
that?
reason why, I mean, it's good because one of the things that I've been trying to understand is I read Carol Dweck's mindset book, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
so
she's
basic,
great.
and then also read Outliers by I forget the guy's name.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes. And so essentially it's like, well, mindset is you can do anything that you want to do. And then same thing with outliers. As long as you put in the work, you can be the next Bill Gates or whatever it is. But then there's this, have you heard of Clifton Strengths?
No.
So Clifton,
Strength Finder? Is
yeah,
that?
Strength Finder. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, sure.
So it's like
That's Marcus
34
Buckingham
strengths.
and the Clifton. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So based on that, it says that you have a certain number of strengths and then you have, things that are weaknesses. And it's just natural how it is, the way that you are after the age of 21 or whatever it is, right? And so I've been learning or doing research on that and saying that, well, if you just focus on your strengths and then find other people to help complement your weaknesses, but then outliers and mindset makes me think that you can do if you put in the work, you can make your weaknesses strengths.
Yeah. If you look at my little library and the one I have at home, what's funny is what you're pointing out.
Mhm.
Carol Dweck and I said Daniel Kahneman and those guys are more brain focused. Malcolm Gladwell's more of a sociologist, so I don't know that he speaks as much about the brain, but and I love his work. Don't get me wrong. But you and I could pull a book off my shelf where someone's what you're saying is, so Steve, should we recognize what our strengths are and just maximize those, or recognize what our weaknesses are and try to strengthen or some other way create a system around that? Which should I do?
Mhm. Yeah.
And which is more effective and which is more whatever? And what's funny is that you can pull 100 books out and 50 will say one and 50 will say the other, you know? And that's why you're sitting there going, well, Malcolm Gladwell said this and Carol Dweck said that. Yeah. And I could find some really, really smart people who say one or the other. Think about that in athletics. Okay. Does an athlete, and I don't know, you could pick any sport, but I
Mhm.
don't know, let's just pick one. Does a basketball player who's really good at, you know, field goals and shooting the ball from the field, who's not that good at free throws, who knows they need to get their free throw percentage up? Do you think they go, what do they do? Do they just focus on their strength? Or do you think in practice they go practice free throws? Which do they do?
I would say they probably spend more time on their strengths and they put some work on the free throws, but probably focus more on what they're good at.
Yeah. Well, here's the answer. I don't know what they do. I don't know. But I suspect you could be right. And I suspect that there could be some of them based on how they view it and how the coaches and whatever.
Mhm.
If you ask Shaquille O'Neal, not to bring up a real character who clearly couldn't shoot free throws very well, did he practice that and try to get better? I want to suggest to you he did, because he didn't need to practice dunking the ball anymore.
Right.
But I'm not suggesting that, like, people have this theory, like, just make your weakness your strength and you can own the world or whatever. Well, that's a theory. And if you, any of these theories, my opinion is if you go overboard and drink too much of either side of the Kool-Aid, it's probably not good for you.
Yeah, I mean, so these questions I'm asking are they seem like very black and white because I like to get the answer, but it
Imagine
just
that, a left mode dominant guy asking me black and white questions. Imagine
yeah,
it.
it just seems like there's no clear answer and you just got to figure it out yourself.
Right. Well, I got one. Can I ask a question? Then we'll
Yeah,
see.
absolutely. Yeah.
Ready?
Hmm.
So now that you want left mode dominant people, if there is dominance, one or the other, it's not always extreme, but there could be dominance.
Hmm.
Left mode dominant are largely understood, or at least the left part of the brain might be a little more in charge of linear thinking, sequential patterns. That's what someone was inferring in the 70s when they said you're left mode, that you're very linear, patterns, sequential, logical, right? Which I told you is debunked, and the brain does both.
Hmm.
Right mode people are more artistic, holistic, big picture. Maybe you would call them emotional or whatever, but that's the difference. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it's easier to work with someone who's left mode dominant and help them integrate right modedness into their world? Or easier to take someone who's right mode dominant and have them integrate some logic and left mode stuff into their world? Which do you think, if you know?
Yeah. So I would think that, I mean, I think your answer would be there's no clear and there's no easier way. But for me, based on my bias, I would say it's easier to make someone who's right-brained think more logically because if you can pull on the heartstrings, right, and pull and make them feel a certain way about having everything in in sequential order, I think to me it just logically makes more sense.
And I'm asking a very subjective opinion only question. It's
Yeah.
been my experience after, nearly 25, 26 years of doing this work
Mm.
that my experience, I don't have the
Mhm.
research, right? This
Mhm.
is anecdotal,
Yeah.
that it is easier to take someone who's right mode and help them see the power of logic and bring that into my world. Like if you said, Steve, you need to do some math and do that, I'd probably see that. When you take someone who's really logical and
Mhm.
go, hey, maybe we should just talk about love or some other right mode concept and bring that into your world. Left mode dominant's been my experience that because it doesn't always make sense, it's just really hard because I have always valued logic. And so that's why I think a guy like you who would be willing to explore bringing in some right mode stuff without making you only shoot free throws. I'm not trying to make you a right mode dominant person.
Mhm.
I just wonder in the work that you do or the relationships you had, if you integrated a little bit more right mode dominant, could you become even that much more complete? Or in your language, might it impact your business for good because you weren't leaning so heavily on left mode dominant stuff?
You know what's pretty funny? So in when you're saying this, I've done a lot of different things in real estate, including like, fix and flips, fix and holds. I've landed on this business where it's a lending business where there's no emotion. It's asset based. There's an easy checklist where you just follow all these things. Is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Then we come up with a number, and then the number is what we'll be willing to loan. And then we have, I mean, there's like no emotion tied to any of it. And
Until
that's,
you have to talk to somebody and convince them to do something or not.
yeah.
Then you couldn't convince me that there's no emotion. I promise you the limbic system is involved.
You're right. And that's on the capital raising side where I have to bring in investors to then go fund these projects.
Yeah. Well, even our dialogue, someone who listens to this is going to hear right mode guy and left mode guy. Like, but I'm not trying to argue that one is good or bad or right or
Mhm.
wrong.
Yeah.
I actually think an integrative approach can help us. And because everybody does have a dominance, no, I mean, do what you do best. I hope you don't go out and lose your left mode dominance all because you're trying to be more emotional. But I also hope that in your line of work, if you want to raise capital or whatever, you might recognize the power of what it means to in yourself understand those emotions and help other people understand them. That sounds like it could be really helpful for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely something that I've been thinking about, and I'm gonna bring in another book because I like books. It's that principle of who, not how. Bring in someone that covers my weakness of being able, I guess, being right-brained and raising capital. To me, I think if you're more right-brained, it's easier to raise capital because then you're building emotional connections and building that relationship versus logic-based. Uh, yeah.
Again, I think we all have a tendency. I don't want you to get off the call and go, that's it. I'm just going to go find some right mode nut job who
No.
has, no, I know you're not saying that, but
Yeah.
we might have a tendency like, yes, could you hire someone who's understands that? But even them, if you went too far and they lacked the logic, they can't even do math, they can't even zip up their own pants, but they can sure make people feel a certain thing. That might not be helpful to you
Yeah.
because so it's an integration. So yes,
Mhm.
by all means do that, but I might suggest for you, John, that doing a few little things that strengthen, if you want to use that word,
Mhm.
the right side could be a more complete approach to how we educate, communicate, and otherwise influence people.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've tried that. I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I had trouble getting through that. There was another.
Because it's a right mode dominant book, because Dale Carnegie was probably a right mode dominant dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll have
I
to
had
find.
trouble getting through that. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Just get me to the graphs and charts where how to win friends
Yeah.
and people just freaking on page 3, just tell me how and show me the
Yeah.
chart.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Steve, I have very much enjoyed our conversation. Um, I know you have a coaching program. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Sure. Rewire Inc. Is my company. Rewire Inc. I tried to get Rewire only when I created the company. What now? 13 years ago, but it's owned by an electrical company in New Jersey. Last I looked, so we have Rewire Inc. is my company. We're not hard to find online. We're not hard to find on LinkedIn. Um, yes, we are a mindset coaching company, which is distinct from a skill set, right? Like people that want, I need you to tell me what to do and hold me accountable. Well, probably reach out to a different company that does that. We don't. We help people explore so that they can see beyond themselves in a way, like even a little bit about what you and I did. If I were coaching you, like as you might be able to tell, coaching could be a really cool thing because I can't just give you this thing. And so it's a process, and all of our coaches have gone through the Neuro Leadership Institute, or at least are certified through the ICF. And so we just take a mindset approach. So anyone in business and leadership who knows that that mindset is such a huge element, we're a coaching company. And we also speak and do trainings around the country. So yeah, that would be wonderful. Anyone listening, we'd love to talk to you if it's important for you.
Okay, very cool. And so we have your website, and then is the best way to reach out to you via social media like LinkedIn or the website?
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn.
the
Okay.
the website, I think info@rewiring.com or grow@rewiring.com, but all of that is through the website or LinkedIn. We're doing our best in this world to not be hard to find, but it's a loud world, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we've had our own podcast for 3 years, and we've got 300 episodes, and we do a podcast called The Insight Interviews, that my business partner and he's in Maryland and I'm here in Oregon. But yeah, that would be a great way to find us. I did publish. I've actually written 3 books. I published 2 of them only, but one of them was on the lizard brain, and it's called Still the
Uh,
Lizard. And that's,
okay.
you can go find that book on Amazon or anything like that. So there's
It's
ways to.
funny. It's funny you bring up the lizard brain. It was in one of the books that I listened to, and I mean, whenever I start talking to someone about an opportunity, I can just see their eyes glaze over because it's just fact based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
or here's a strategy: just go find fact-based people, and then you don't
yeah.
have to worry about the right brain stuff. But
Yeah, that is
unfortunately,
true.
and the world's full of both. And so
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, Still the Lizard is the name of the book. Uh,
Okay.
and so again, Amazon or anywhere else, if someone wants to read a little bit about my work on the lizard brain, it was a fairly small little anecdotal book because once you get into neuroscience, it gets complicated pretty quick. And I was just trying to do something fairly simple. So anyway,
Okay.
not hard to reach, and certainly grateful for you that you'd be willing to ask, and we'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, very cool. So I will make sure to have the links, your the website, your LinkedIn, and your book, as well as your podcast, the links in the description. So it's just very easy for people
See, I'm
to
so
find you.
grateful for your left motedness. Like if I was a right brain guy, I would have heard all that and said, super cool. And I'm not sure I would have gotten to it. But that's not true because I did what you did. And
Mm,
my colleague who works with me, Stephanie Weatherby, she's fantastic and she's left mode dominant and she really helps me.
very cool. Well, Steve, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.